All right. Hey, I want to share with you folks how I took a little 1/64th scale truck like this Dodge Ram lift bed here and turned it into a weathered, personalized work truck for a company who is reached out to me and asked me if I would, do this for them. And this is the type of truck they drive for their business, and the type of tools that they repair manhole covers and stuff like that for the city. And so I created the tools and weathered the truck up, and it was a pretty fun thing. And the thing about it is, it was something that I do that's different than normal. And so I want to share the process with you, because this type of thing carries over into other, painting other props and stuff too. The goal here was not that I wanted to rust this out and damage it and dent it up. I wanted it to look new, but just that it had been dirtied up. So let me share with you how I did it. And it's not a long process, but it's kind of a long video. I didn't really want to cut too much of it out. I wanted to share with you all the way from the beginning to the end, where I start to weather and add the washes, all the way up to where I do the water slide decals for the door. I just think it's a pretty cool little process if you haven't done one before, that you'd like to see it. And so here we go. I've got different size brushes here on the towel. I've got a mixture of black Vallejo paint mixed with isopropyl alcohol. And the reason I'm using isopropyl alcohol for the wash is because it dries really quickly. I don't need to worry about, dry time and things like that. The isopropyl, and I can rework it. I don't need to worry about if it dries too quick and it left behind sort of a stain or something that I don't like. I can rework it. It's not a big deal. So we're going into the crevices and the cracks here, and we're just going to add some of the watered down black. And I'm putting it on in a sort of a darkness or an opacity, that I like. I don't want it full on black. I mean, that's just not realistic. So you can sort of, there's an opaque quality to it. It's a wash, and it's not being painted on. It's a wash, and so I keep it fairly light. And working it with the different brushes, the different size brushes, helps me create little patterns and spread the alcohol around in there, and just create some random smudging and stuff like that. The trick about this that I learned, because like I said, I haven't done this before, is this is a small piece. You don't want to go in there with a big brush and just start covering everything up, because it's going to look not scaled. It's going to look a bit inappropriate. And so you can see here the small brushes really play an important part in getting into the fine detail and keeping everything really scaled. And, so we get a little Vallejo silver, and I want to paint the bottom up a little bit. Not all of it, just some of the important components. And it looks really shiny right now, but we're going to add a wash to that later and dull it down a bit. So, and it doesn't have to be a perfect paint job on the bottom, where, you get in there and you paint the bulk of it up. Make sure that you hit where you want with the paint. You don't want to get any, unintentionally on parts that you don't want to paint. But even if you do, we're going to put washes over it. So it's okay. It's going to dull it down a bit and blend it in and make it, look more natural. And so, this part here, I wanted to do it because I wanted to give as much, to the customers I thought was cool. And so being able to paint the underside and then the side with the leaf springs and things like that just gives a extra little bit of eye candy for the customer to look at and enjoy this custom truck that has their logo on it. I mean, I never would have thought I'd have made one of these. It was pretty cool and pretty fun. And it wasn't hard to find a truck like this, for I think I got it, what was it called? Outback Toy Store. And I just did a pretty generic search for Dodge Ram utility truck lift bed, and this came up. So we're going to get a little bit of pigment out here. I'm going to put it in the paint palette. And the trick here is a little isopropyl alcohol in the compartment next to it, because I want to dip the brush in the alcohol, then I want to dip it in the pigment, and I want to stipple it on I want to stipple it on and start with my lightest of the colors first, and then go darker on top of those. So I'm just kind of packing it into the door jambs and the fender jambs and stuff here, and then I'm just kind of feathering it back, getting an overall shape with the pigment that I think is good, and making the shape wide enough to, like I say later, I'm going to add darker colors on there and blend those out also. And so the small brushes are really, really super helpful. You can see I do have some sponge there with the hemostats there to the locking pliers to sort of blend and create some random patterns. But even that, I typically use sponges all the time on models that I paint and weather. But here, you got to think of everything really small. And so that sponge was a bit big. So we're going to stipple with the bristles of the brush here and just sort of blend it back. It just worked better than the sponge did. The sponge was a bit too big. I could have cut it and made it smaller, but why do that when I've got a perfectly good paintbrush here that I can stipple with also. And you can stipple with this. You can smear rework the shape of the pigment, rework the sort of opacity of the pigment just by adding more alcohol. One thing that you want to do is I'll dip it in the alcohol, just the tip, then I'll knock it back a little bit on the towel. I don't want an overly saturated model with alcohol, and then it's running down into places that I don't want, and it's hard to control. So you just want it moist enough to rework the pigment, and then it'll dry really quick too that way, and so it's easy to control. What a cool project this was, man. And I'm gonna tell you, I saw so many cool 1/64th scale vehicles on that website, man. I might even buy a couple just to, I don't know what I'd do with them. I don't have anything that's 1/64th, but they look so cool. We're drying the alcohol here with my hands, and I do have a heat gun, and later I plug that in and I use the heat gun to dry this up. So we're going to continue to put this color where I think it should go, wheel wells, front end. This particular color, I use a couple different browns because dirt and mud and grime isn't just black, or just, it isn't brown. It's, different shades. And so I build those colors up and those layers up with different color pigments. And it just gives it another layer sort of kind of, I don't know, believability, but it just looks more natural. A little alcohol on the brush there, dab it off, and rework that area there. Sometimes what happens is the pigment will dry, and it will dry in a shape, or it will have a hard edge to it that I don't like. So what I'll do is I'll dip the paintbrush tip in the alcohol just enough to wet it, just enough to rework the edge of the pigment that I just laid down, so that it doesn't have some hard, unnatural looking edge to it, or some texture that's too big for the scale of the vehicle. And so that's kind of what I'm doing there. So we'll flip it over and we'll do the same on this side. Start getting that brown in there on the boards and the wheel wells and the fenders and inside a little bit. Just kind of use your imagination here and take your time. You don't want to do this with some broad brush. I mean, part of the fun in this is just being able to escape a little bit from what's going on around you in the real world. And so you can't really think of this as, oh, I got to go in and do this and get it done quick as I can. For me, it's a bit of an escape, and so if I take my time with it, like I do, then it just helps me stay in that zone much longer than having to come back to earth. You know what I mean? So here we got a little passionate about the application. But see, that's the cool thing about it. You see, that's an ugly shape, and it didn't really spread the way I wanted it to. So we just wet the pigment again, and there you go, man. You just rework it, man, and just spread it out, and see how easy that is. The alcohol is really super helpful, and And it's perfect on the finish of the truck because that's probably an enamel that they sprayed on there. And so the alcohol isn't going to bother it one bit. I didn't put any sealer, base coat, or anything on the factory paint. It wasn't necessary. This is just isopropyl alcohol and pigments. You can use Vallejo pigments, or what I do is I grind up soft chalk pastels and I keep those in little bins like you see right there. And it's a less expensive way to go than using the Vallejo pigments. I do have those, but I use them more sparingly just because they're more costly, and they're always on back order. It always seems like the really cool ones that you want take forever to get, so I just use soft chalk pastels. And I keep a dry brush. I keep varying size brushes. There's a couple wet brushes there, and I keep one dry. And I just work this, man. I just have a good time and get lost kind of in the overall process of it. And some of this is, I don't want to say new, but it's sort of new to this scale. And so, I kind of had to think about my approach. I wanted, like, for example, later you'll see the truck bed looks pretty new and pretty dark, and the paint is pretty rich, and so I have to think of a way to dull it down a little bit and make it look a little bit more faded and matte it down a little bit. And what I normally do is I'll weather stuff and I'll paint peel stuff and I'll rust it, but that's not the case on this. This needs to be just look dirty, and so I had to think of some different processes to accomplish that. And the way you saw the photos, I think I did a pretty reasonable job. It was pretty fun. Kind of blend this up and feather it a little bit. Using all the different edges of the brush is a great way to make a couple different tools out of the same brush, My idea is let's work on that front end a little bit. Nobody wants a front end that looks that shiny. And just in my mind, I think there would be some accumulation of dirt in there. Some accumulation of grime and sediment of some kind. They'd be full of bugs and butterflies too, but I don't have those. But look how nice the pigment lays on there. Just really, really nice. The small brush just really gets it in there. And the trick is just to really, sometimes I want to really cake the pigment on there, and so I'll load my brush up with it. Sometimes I want to really water down or create a wash with the pigment by using more alcohol. So here I just dip the brush in the alcohol, and then I sort of just lightly go across it just to blend it in there, and see how it just sort of really softens it up and blends it in, and it doesn't look really too unnatural. It's just a balance of finding what looks good to your eye and what looks sort of believable, and taking the time to work it and have a good time sort of experimenting with what looks good to you. So here I'm going to add the next darker color that I want, and we're going to apply this in areas over the top of the lighter color. So sometimes you want to work from dark to light. Here we're working from light to darker, and we're going to really pack this into the edges, to the very, right up close to the door jambs, right up close to the wheel wells, and give it that extra layer of darkness. There's always room for more darkness. Whatever. Anyway, it's a damn truck. But you can see I kind of come in here and raise it up and show you. It's going to go from the really dark edges and then feather out to a little bit lighter. So Same thing with this here is even with a finer tip brush because it's going right into the edges, so I need a little bit more control. And Amazon has this really cool pack of like 200 paintbrushes for like $15. So I don't care if I ruin half of them over the next month, which I do. They get all gunked up with Mod Podge and they get gunked up with all kinds of other stuff. I just toss them out and later on I'll get another 200, man. They're cheap and they're kind of for that, I think. I think they made these just for me because I cannot keep paintbrushes. Good thing I'm not a painter. But in here, just dab a little inside the rim, you know. Put a little alcohol on there and put a little wash inside there, dirty that rim up. No doubt, we don't want shiny rims on that work truck. It's like you're the guy that comes into work with the shiny new boots. You need to drag them through the mud before you come to work the first day. Make those boots look broke in. Same thing with the rims. Here we're just trying to find some places to put this stuff. I poured some in the paint palette, so I got to use it now. Anyway, so same thing on the other side. Just create the wash with it and dip it in the isopropyl and put it kind of where you think it should go. And there's probably places that you see on here that it could go that looks good to your eye that, you know, I didn't put on there because, you know, I just didn't think of it. And so that's the fun part of this is everybody has their own kind of eye as to what would look right or, you know, would make sense. But if you've got the paintbrushes and you've got the isopropyl and some pigments, man, grab a Hot Wheel out of your kid's toy box or something and try this. It's pretty fun. And there's a whole community, and I didn't know this, a whole community of people that just take Hot Wheels, strip them down, and create dents and using tin foil and just doing all these crazy custom paint jobs to Hot Wheels. My God, how totally fun some of that stuff looks, but I'm not doing that here. Once again, really light wash, just knocking back the white in some areas. You can see I've in other parts of the video that I edited out to save you guys the time of listening to me, I added some real light black washes and stuff in there just to sort of dull out the white paint. Now what I got here is a little medicine cup, and this is concrete, but what it is I sifted it out like last year. I sifted it through a colander, and I separated the really fine powdery aggregate from the bigger pieces of rock. And I'm going to mix this. It comes in handy. I mean, you could do it with a stucco, a pre-mixed stucco or something kind of watered down if you wanted to or whatever. You don't have to sift a bag of concrete out like I did. It's probably better that you don't. And I'm going to mix it with a little Mod Podge. And what I'm going to do here is this is going to help me dull down while adding a little bit of texture to the truck bed. I don't want it to look all shiny and black and you've got this white cab that is all dirtied up, and you know I want it to have the same dullness as the cab of the truck does. So I have this idea, and I haven't done this before, so I'm kind of sparingly putting this stuff on here and thinking about it at the same time, making sure that it's the right direction to go because you know, because you just don't know. And I think, okay, it's cool. We could work with this. And what I end up doing is just stippling the whole truck bed with this mixture. And there's not enough. Well, I don't want to say there's not enough. The aggregate that I mixed in there isn't coarse enough to really, you know, it's not as like coarse as sand. It's much more powdery than that. So it makes a nice fine texture on the truck lift bed, but the matte Mod Podge dulls the black paint down really nicely and gives me the effect that I'm totally after. So I just spread it all through here and work it into the edges and the you know, creases of the dump bed, and then Get it all in through there. Just stipple it on there. Let it dry with the heat gun. I think I put the heat gun on it here. Just let it dry really quickly. And it's important if you're trying to dull something out that you want to use matte Mod Podge. So I took a little bit and I sprinkled it on into the bed to sort of give it a look that there's some residual dirt in there. Don't worry about the color of it right now. We're going to go over that later. And one of the good things about this method is I can go back over the top of it with pigments, and it's going to change the color of the the dust that I sprinkled on there. And I will add some brown pigments on there to make it look more like dirt and not like sifted concrete. So stipple that in there, then blend it with the sponge, knock it back a little bit so that there's not weird patterns in there that look too heavy-handed. And so there we are. Same thing on the other side. Do the undercarriage a little bit. And I got a little bit overconfident. So the sprinkling the dust in the bed was a great idea, but I go to sprinkle a little bit on the bottom here, and I probably could have did without that. But it's all right. You can blend it all with a little bit of pigment. Nobody will ever know. So we'll just, this is a good technique for the bottom. I'm dulling it down, and I'm just, taking the black and dulling it down like the underside of a car or work truck would look. It would look, sort of dulled down. I probably could have did without adding a little bit of dust on the bottom of that, like I say, but it's called custom. It's called custom. Now I got a thumbprint on the top of that truck because I might have had some alcohol in my hand or something. We'll fix that later. No big deal. Little black pigment on the bottom of this and a couple little sprays of isopropyl, and that'll all blend right in real nice. That shininess of the silver will go down. And look at the brush I'm using here. It's not just any brush. I'm using a really, really soft, sort of a foxtail, not a foxtail, sort of like a fan brush. But I just really want just a little bit of black pigment in here because I'm going to spray the isopropyl on there, and it's really, once it dries, going to make the underside of the carriage look like there's, it's just not so shiny and that it's, a used truck. The heat gun really comes in handy. It dries the alcohol really quickly. So look at the silver parts on there. It looks really good. Definitely looks like it's not so shiny and new, and I like that. And the matte Mod Podge really dulled down the undercarriage and the truck bed. Now we need to fix the white dust in the back of the truck, and we'll just, once again, get some of those pigments out of there. And I don't want to cake these in there. I just want to change the color of the white powder. And so, being that it's a texture, the pigment really grabs right to it, and a little bit of isopropyl sprayed in there will set that stuff in there solid. And you might think, oh, well, you're just setting this with isopropyl, but later I'll spray it. When I'm totally done applying the layers, I'll spray it with an aerosol Mod Podge sealer to fix it all permanently to the truck. So little silver paint here. What am I getting? Oh yeah, I'm going to paint the leaf springs and stuff on here. I didn't paint them the first time, so a little silver paint is going to help me get those suspension parts in there painted that I didn't catch the first time because I didn't see them. Look at that little bed. It lifts right up. How cool is that? Same thing on the other side. Paint those rascals up and make sure we're consistent getting the pieces all the way around. So here I want to dry brush really, really lightly. There's some detail that's like stamped into the rear of the truck here, some little pigtail connections and stuff like that. But the embossing really is really subtle. So I want to really try to just lightly dry brush this with a little silver to bring it out off of the black frame a little bit. And so that's what I'm doing here. And I'll hold it up to the camera and you'll be able to see that little dry brushing on those little connections there. It really worked out nice. Water slide decals. Let me tell you about these. So I went in, the guy sent me the logo, and then I just, I went in Photoshop and I just scaled the size to the door. I measured the door of the truck, and then there's what's called water slide decal paper, and you can use this with your inkjet printer. It's totally fine. You're going to have a couple things to do it correctly, though. But water slide decals are great if you're applying them over a light colored surface, preferably white. You're going to need water. You're going to need aerosol Mod Podge, and you're going to need a couple brushes and a pair of tweezers. And so this page here has been sprayed. It's come out of the inkjet printer, dried, and then I've sprayed it with an aerosol Mod Podge thoroughly. Spray it. Don't just douse it on there really quickly. I mean, spray it lightly, mist it on there, from a couple different angles, let it dry, do another coat, let it dry, do another coat. So, and the reason is because inkjet ink is water soluble. And so if you were to dip that right into the water, it's all going to come right off that page. So the aerosol sealer, the Mod Podge sealer, prevents that from happening. And so it gives it the waterproof it needs for you to be able to put this decal into the water and it not fade and run all over and change the color of the water. So with a really sharp blade in the X-Acto knife, I want to cut a couple of these out and start putting them onto the truck. You want to have all these things really next to you when you start this, because, and I've printed a lot of extra here, because if you've ever done water slide decals, make sure you have extra. Anything can happen. It can be a bit of a challenge sometimes, but if you have a good process down, then, and this is a really simple application anyway. The hardest part about this application is these are really small. Keep in mind, these are like a 30th of an inch or something. I mean, they're going on a door of a truck that's 1/64th, and they're just really tiny. So the hardest part about this is removing the water slide decal itself from the paper backing once I've let it soak for 2 minutes. Each water slide decal paper that brand that you buy is going to have its own instructions, but they're all going to be print with your inkjet printer, spray with your sealer, let it dry, put it in water for probably about 2 minutes, and then it will start to release itself from that paper backing. And if you leave it in there too long, it's going to release from the paper backing into the bowl. At that point, you might as well just cut another one out and start again, because you cannot let them fold over on themselves. They're really thin. They're really fragile. So I do use them, especially like here on a truck like this. I wouldn't want to use an adhesive vinyl sticker. I've got sticker paper. I could print that right out, run it through the Cricut, and make the logo a vinyl sticker, but I didn't want that. I thought it would look a little too embossed or embellished. It'd give it too much of an edge on the truck, and it would look really kind of weird. And so the water slide decal is really thin, and there's not really a visible edge. And the other thing is you can see beneath it. So if there's weathering on the truck door, like in this case, you can see the weathering below the decal. So it makes it look a little bit more believable. But look, I've got to cut this rascal with the razor by hand and my old eyes and get my tweezers out. It's a process, and you want to have all this really set up. Dipping this in the water is the last thing you really want to do, because then you've started the clock. You've got 2 minutes and your surface already has to be ready and everything. So You notice I have a couple different paintbrushes there too. One is going to be to apply water to the surface that I'm, look how small that is, the surface that I'm going to be putting the water slide decal. That thing is tiny, man. Oh, why do I do this to myself? This is just plain water, just room temperature, right, right from the tap. I'm going to set my timer over here to 2 minutes because that's what this particular brand of water slide decal calls for, a 2-minute timer. Now, too, the thing you want to watch for, since this has been sprayed with the Mod Podge aerosol sealer, a waterproofing sealer, it's going to want to float on top of the water. You need to push that down into the water and make sure the water gets on top of it because it's just going to sit there and float on top. Let that bad boy soak for a minute. Now we're going to take our paintbrush, dip a little water on there, and we're going to just wet. And it's gonna not look like it's wetting the door because at this point, I should point out too that I've sprayed the truck already with the aerosol Mod Podge to set all the pigments permanently, so the water is going to beat up on the door. The reason I did that was because I didn't want the water from the water slide decal to disturb any of the pigments that I set in there with the isopropyl. I didn't want it to start to bleed or anything like that and then create runs and discoloration in the water slide decal. So before this part, I actually sprayed the truck with the Mod Podge aerosol to prevent that. And so when you go to put the water on the door with the paintbrush, it sort of beads up like a wax on a car. It is wet, but it's just, and you don't want to overly wet it. The reason you want to wet it first is because it gives the water slide decal a surface to slide around on a little bit, and so that once it hits the truck door, it just doesn't stay in place and you're ruined and you have to start again. It gives it a little bit of time for you to get it in position. So here we're going to grab this thing. This is a chore sometimes. And if you're going to do water slide decals, print extra, because if you've never done them, you're going to mess up the first few times, and don't worry about it. I mean, it's everybody probably does. So we're taking the water slide decal out. There's a paper backing on there. Let me turn my timer off. There's a paper backing on there. I'm using the edge of the X-Acto knife to hold on to the water slide decal as I slide it off of the paper. And if you don't soak this long enough, you're not going to get that separation, and you're going to have to put it back in the water, and hopefully you'll be able to get it separated and not ruined. But if you've got extra printed, then you're okay. So here with the brush, I'm just going to go ahead and pull that paper out. It's hard for you to see because my fat head is in the way, but I'm going to pull that paper backing out, and the X-Acto blade is going to hold. The X-Acto blade is pulling the paper out, and the paintbrush is holding the decal. And so now I'm going to pull the paper out with the tweezers, and the decal is on the truck. So it sounds like a lot, but it's not. Now, and another important thing here. Don't touch that once it's on there in the position it needs to be on. Let it dry. Don't flip it over and let the towel touch it either, because it will come right off. Remember when I first started doing like those ice machines that I sell on my Patreon? I was, those are pretty easy because the water slide decals are big. But when I went to flip the ice machine over, when I first started doing the water slide decals, I thought, cool, man, I'll flip that over and let it dry, and I'll do the other side. And yeah, it came right off as it stuck to the towel. I didn't have it laying flat on the towel. I mean, I wasn't that bonehead. I had it propped up so that I thought that nothing was touching it, but somehow something touched it and it ruined it. So anyway, make sure your water slide decals are thoroughly dried overnight, and then you can spray them with the Mod Podge aerosol and seal them up so that when you touch them with your hand, they don't get ruined. I mean, these things are like rice paper, man. Look at this thing, man. It's just giving me grief. It's like trying to hold on to a wet gummy bear. But anyway, onto the other side. And that's my water slide course for you. They're not really that hard. Just be patient. You know, you'll mess a few up before you get where you can sort of confidently go into the process and put them down. I'm looking for something just to kind of prop this up a little bit so that the one on the other side doesn't touch the towel. So we'll wet the door a little bit. Same thing. That same process. Wet the door a little bit. My timer is timing down. The timer is timering. We'll put a little bit more water on there just in case, because it beads up, like I say, and it doesn't look wet. Excuse me. I want to make sure that the door does have enough moisture on it. Getting into position. Preparing to prepare, Sergeant. You just said in the Army. Prepare to prepare. It's probably too much information. But so here we're just, you know, standing here looking pretty and letting the timer count down. Don't try to rush it. If it says 2 minutes, give that bad boy 2 minutes, because if you don't, you're not going to get the separation. And don't go longer than 2 minutes. You can jiggle the water slide decal in there a little bit and see if it's separating it. If it is, you're good. Don't leave it in there for, like, you know, a long time, because it'll separate in there and you won't get to use it. It'll just be ruined floating around in there and you'll never get a hold of it. All right, here we go. It's all or nothing, baby. Grab that thing. And if you can't grab it, slide it up the side of the bowl till you can grab it. There you go. Same thing. We got that rascal on there. Now, too, if you get a little bubble in your water slide decal, you can just take your little paintbrush with a little water on it, just lightly go over that little bubble and brush it right out. Really, really lightly, because you will tear the water slide decal. But same thing here. I'm just getting a hold of it and I'm pulling the paper backing off, and my paintbrush is there too. That one did get a little bit crooked and I had to reposition it with the wet paintbrush. And so, but once again, if you have those tools, you know, right there at your disposal, because you kind of know the process, then you're prepared for, you know, kind of whatever might happen. And so it's not a big deal. You wouldn't have, you know, time to run and go grab a brush and then go fill up your bowl with water and look for some tweezers. You know, you want to have all those things really just right there so that you can make the process as easy as it needs to be. Hey, I almost forgot to, because this video will be later on YouTube. If you haven't followed me on any of my social media platforms, please do so. I'm on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, YouTube, Instagram at insightful_imagery. And you can find me on there where I hang out all the time. You can check out my website, insightfulimagery.com. You can check out YouTube and find videos like this, or you can get them on my Patreon first, and usually with, you know, a few more little added bonuses. But at any rate, here is the water slide decals. I think we got a pretty good looking truck here. Smooth that out a little bit. Real light, man. Real feathered touch. And I think we got a good looking truck. This guy wants me to make a trailer too, so I got to model a trailer and 3D print a trailer for this vehicle. But hey, let's take a look at it and see what we're working with. And I've got extra decals, so when I do make the trailer, I've got decals for it. Let's take a look at this, man. Look at this. How sweet that is. Awesome. Anyway, I thought, you know, you guys would appreciate something like this, man. And I appreciate all my Patreon members and all my YouTube subscribers. You guys take care, and we'll holler at you later on.